Hi everyone, I hope you've been well. Here is episode 4 video recap, and my dog is again on my lap. I don't know why he likes to do this. I know I promised last week that I wasn't going to look at pictures, but I think I am resolved to go quickly through the recap looking at the pictures because there's a lot here and I want to go through quickly. So I'll get the recap done first, and then for those of you who want to stick around, you can for my musings on the episode. So let's go ahead and get started. Episode 4 starts off with Kangchi collapsing on Yeowol's shoulders after their escape from, the merchant park's servants, because the wife set them loose on him to get rid of him, and so that he doesn't return. And as he collapses, she sees the crescent moon hanging over the peach tree. Now what happens though is that as she's dealing with him back at the inn, or their now huge hotel business, our resident evil guy, Cho Kwon-un, shows up, and he is demanding that they provide housing for all of his, entourage plus him. And when Taeseo, the son who's left in charge, tells him, "I'm sorry, there's very little vacancy," they insist that he kick out the already, I guess, booked guests. And so there's like a confrontation between those two. Now, in the meanwhile, Yeowol has taken Kangchi to kind of a little shed area so that he can kind of sleep it off. And she just kind of looks at him, wondering, "Who are you?" And, trying to poke him awake and such, right? And she's now really perplexed, because, not perplexed, but she just looks and thinks, "Wow, are you the guy that I am destined to be with?" Right? And there's a part of her that's kind of interested until he starts snoring, and then she's like, "Oh, please, go away. Shoo, shoo." And then she spits it, she goes, she's like, "I don't want this type of destiny man," right? Anyway, her companion and protector comes in, and he tries to wake Kangchi up, and she's like, "Don't try, because I've tried and he, won't wake up." And so her companion kind of like takes out his long sword or broadsword, and then he's about to, like, he literally goes and sticks the sword right into the pillow, right? And at that, sign of danger, even though Kangchi had been, fast asleep up until that point, like literally a second before that blade pierces the pillow, or the straw pillow where his head was, he gets up and he's like, "Oh my gosh, who are you? What are you guys trying to do? Kill me or something?" Right? And then that's when the companion and Yeowol says, "Wow, you guys finally woke up." And Kangchi demands, "Who are you and what am I doing here?" and things like that. And he proceeds to, there's like this really funny scene, because the protector, or the companion of Yeowol, he is so funny, deadpan funny, because in a previous episode when they were being chased by the servants, he had said, "Oh, like," he said something really funny. Well, in this episode, Kangchi's like, "Who's your name? I mean, what's your name?" And he's like, "Well, normally you introduce yourself first and then, ask for someone's name." And so Kangchi says, "Fine, I'm Kangchi from, this inn. Now what's your name?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't tell people my name because I tend to be really shy. And so until I get to know you better, I don't tell people my name." And Kangchi's like, "What the heck?" And so he's about to like throw a fist at him, and then Yeowol intercepts and says, "Hey, is this the way to treat someone who has saved your life?" And Kangchi's like, "What, you? You saved my life?" And he looks her over, and of course she's like this very thin, frail person. He's like, "Like you could try. I don't believe it." And so then Yeowol literally sends him, like spitting to a stack of straw with a side kick, or I think it's called a roundhouse kick, right? And so he is just kind of stunned, and it's so funny because he does this whole thing again, very reminiscent of his father, and reminiscent of the previous episode when, the daughter had kissed him on the cheek, right? But the irony is that this here is now in pain and in shock that, he has been taken, I guess, the upper hand. Someone had gotten the upper hand in a fight. So anyway, next thing you know is that she takes him back, Kangchi, back to the inn, or to his home. And the funny thing is she has him tied up, and he's like tied in the hands too. And while this is all going on, the confrontation in the inn has just gotten worse. And Taeseo, the son, has told Cho Kwang-woo that he can't kick out the guests who are already there because his father's law in business, or his father's philosophy in business, is to treat all of their guests equally. And he makes this point of saying even if the king were to come, he would be treated with the same respect as all of our guests. And of course, Cho Kwon like freaks out, the evil, man. He goes, "Enom, and all this stuff, right? Anyway, so the one of the servants is sent to find Kangchi because Tesla really relies on Kangchi, and I love their relationship. But anyway, so he asks, "Go find Kangchi," and so the servant goes, and of course, the servant is on his way, right? And they're going to meet in the on the road. But it's hilarious because Kangchi, as he's being literally, I guess, led or walked back to the inn, is trying to explain that he's actually like a good guy and he doesn't deserve to be tied up like this. And she's like, "So then why were you being chased by these men?" And he won't say. Kangchi won't say. And so the servant, her companion, says, "Well, it's typically either he is being chased because he has swindled someone." And then he's like, "No." Kangchi says no. And then the guy says, "Or he has very complicated women problems." And then Kangchi can't say anything, right? And then she's like, "Oh, so you're one of those players." And Kangchi gets all upset. He's like, "I'm not a player. I'm like pure in heart and my, whatever, right? My love is pure." And she's like, "Sure, if someone else loves, it's, playing and fooling around. But if you love, then it's pure and, true." And so he gets all upset and huffy puffy. Well, into this little verbal skirmish, the servant finally shows up and he's like, "Is that you, Kangchi?" Because Kangchi's like, "Oh my gosh, please untie me because I can't have anyone see me in this tied up state." He has a reputation to keep, right? And so the look on Kangchi's face as he looks and he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's the guy from my home." He's like frozen, and then he turns quickly back to Yeowon and he says, "Please untie me, please untie me." And so of course Yeowon is like excited. She turns Kangchi back and she's like, "Is this the guy you're looking for?" And Kangchi's expression is hilarious. He's like, "Oh gosh." And so the servant is, asking, "Sir, how did you get to be like this, right? And who are these people?" And so Kangchi literally takes his arm and he puts it around Yeowon's neck, and he's like, "Oh, these are my friends that I met. We're so close now, even though we've only met each other for one day, that we can joke around like this." And he has her literally in a headlock. And the companion, when he sees that, his eyes widen, and he like tries to tear them apart. And so part of me wonders, is this, partly jealousy, possible love triangle there, or is it because he's trying to protect, his mistress, right? But anyway, so he learns very quickly, Kangchi learns very quickly of this confrontation that is going on at, back at the inn, and he rushes back. Well, the confrontation has gotten like from bad to worse because Tessel has now told him, even if the king were to be here, I treat all the guests the same. And so the villain's henchman takes out a sword and he literally like brings it right to Tessel's neck and says, "Are you refusing us? If you don't, then this is the, price you're going to have to pay." And, to Tessel's credit, he does not flinch, which is great. I think we have heroes that don't flinch, that stand their ground, that live by their moral code, right? Well, into this whole ruckus, then the mother, Mrs. Park, finds out. So she comes out and she's kneeling on the floor begging for forgiveness. And yeah, you guys, those of you who watch this, you are not going to like the mother, Mrs. Park, because she's just, she's right up there, not quite, but she's getting there with, Cho Kwon-woo, the villain. But anyway, as she is trying to beg for leniency and saying, "Just give us some time, we'll find accommodations for you." And Tessa's like, "Mother," and she's like, "What? We'll find accommodations for them." Well, the daughter comes walking out because she's curious. She wants to know if everything's okay. And the thing that really creeped me out here is that as she walks down to this area, Cho Kwon-woong looks at her and Seowa's face is superimposed. And so he sees her as kind of a Soa like figure. It's so gross. Ugh. Anyway, moving on. So as his gaze focuses on her, the camera focuses on her, and then literally Kangchi comes and he replaces her, right? So that Cho Kwon-woong is forced to deal with Kangchi because Kangchi has already arrived by then. And so there is this huge ruckus, and Kangchi says the famous line that I had recapped or translated for the preview on the blog. He's like, "Will you go quietly, or do you insist on tasting the hot taste of my, fist?" And of course, the evil villains like show him, what it means. And so the servant literally takes the sword, and he's about to, all these servants gather and they're about to literally do away with Kangchi, and Kangchi's like bracelet flashes, and he's able to very quickly turn the tables. And what's awesome is that Yeowol and her companion are up on the rooftop overlooking the inn, seeing everything, just waiting to see if he needs any reinforcement, right? Well, Kangchi is surrounded, of course, by swords, and Yeowol wants to go at that point to help him, and the companion holds her back, saying, "Hey, wait, it's not our fight yet," right? And that's literally when Kangchi, his bracelet flashes, he twirls, and then he very quickly unarms one of the servants, takes the sword, and then literally brings it to the neck of the head, guardsman for the evil villain guy, and it's awesome. And Cho Kwon-woong just, as a way to save face, he starts laughing, and he's like, it looks like, this place is rife with a lot of fun characters and a lot of fun for me, right? Well, thankfully, into that tense situation, one of the, National Guards, if you will, comes rushing into the inn saying, "Oh, Lord, Cho Kwon-woong, we heard that you were, arrived, and, we didn't receive a missive, announcing your arrival, but, I've made accommodations for you and your troops, and, you and your, I guess, entourage, so please come and stay in our quarters," and he takes them away. Thankfully, disaster averted, right? But before he leaves, Cho Kwon-woong looks at the daughter, and he gets this really, like, ugh, gross, image. And then as he's about to leave, Kangchi's bracelet, the head guardsman, or the head henchman, I will call him, of the evil guy, he notices that it had flashed, and he kind of looks at that bracelet with a lot of curiosity. Well, anyway, the next day, Park Musol is back, and he demands to know why all of his guards weren't there to protect and deal with the situation. Because remember, there were 7 or 10 guards there, right? Well, the guy is being called to task, and before, he gets in trouble, Kangchi then quickly, says, Merchant Park, it's all my fault, sir, it's all my fault, because I had gone night fishing or something like that, I think is what he said. I couldn't hear very well. But he's like, I went night fishing, and they were trying to find me, and so, we ended up bypassing each other on the road, and that's why they weren't here to protect. And so Merchant Park is like, really? It required all 7 guards, or 10 guards, I think it was 7 guards to come get you, to go get you back. And so then Kangchi goes, "Oh, Merchant Park, sir, have mercy on me." And then he confesses, "I actually got drunk, and I was creating a ruckus, and so, all the, guardsmen here had to come and take care of my, the trouble that I had created, right?" And then so Merchant Park very wisely says, "I thought you had said that you had met each other on the road, and that they were coming to find you." And, Kangchi is all like, "Oh," and he's trying to bumble and try to make sense of it. He's like, "Well, I was a little drunk, so I'm not quite sure about the situations." And anyway, Merchant Park realizes both of them are lying, and he wants to know exactly what's going on, and neither of those 2 guys are willing to, sell out the mistress. And she is so to the very core. She doesn't fess up, and instead she berates Kangchi saying because of you, the servants weren't here or the guards weren't here, and now Tessel has created this huge mess, and you have just made things from bad to worse because you physically threatened Chogonum. And she then turns to her husband and says, you're going to have to deal with, make reparations because this guy is someone that I think, I think she had heard rumors that they are really afraid of. And so the father and son go off to see Chogonung, while Kangchi has an audience with the mistress. And it's so sad because you would think that after he technically saved the family from imminent harm, she takes him to task saying, why did you return? She's like, how dare you, look at my daughter and blah, blah, blah. So basically at the end of the conversation, because he's trying to tell her, I'm not that bad. What I feel is genuine. She looks at him and she's like, how can I trust someone where I don't even know if you're human or what kind of human you are or, what you are? And he just kind of looks at her stunned and he's like, what? Of course I'm human, right? So anyway, he walks out of the meeting with her or actually the scolding with her. And as he's walking out, he sees the daughter being surrounded by a seamstress, and they're checking out cloth for her I guess trousseau, her wedding trousseau. And as he walks out, he's really kind of bummed, and the daughter sees that too. And of course she's sad that he's bummed. Well, anyway, as he's walking, Yeol sees him, and she very quickly assesses the situation, and she says, so this was the situation, huh? You fall in love with the master's daughter, but you can't have her because of your position in the family and in society, and so now you're left with nothing. And he says, hey, mind your own business, things like that. Oh, sorry, I was trying to pet Belly. Come down. Okay, he has fallen asleep. All right, anyway, so that's the situation. So he tries to walk away, and she takes this little bamboo stick and she like taps him on the head, right? Kind of the way you do in kendo. And literally, it's so funny, the look on his face, because he's like, what the heck? Who just hit me? And then she's equally stunned, thinking, oh my gosh, I thought you were going to evade my little like stick hit. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, I didn't realize you were going to attack me. And she's like, weren't you the same guy who evaded, like, who unarmed, like, however many, henchmen last night? And he's like, well, let's just say that, I could smell the blood, or, that I knew that they were out for my blood. And so out of survival, I ended up, reacting that way. And she's like, so depending on the person, you choose to fight or not. And he's like, you can think of it that way, right? So anyway, he's about to leave. And then she says, hey, by any chance, are you deadly afraid of, she calls them giant spiders. So I can't tell if it's black widows or tarantulas, because yes, I was a little lazy and I didn't look up what Wang Komi means, right? But it just, translation means like king spider or big spider, giant spider, right? But anyway, he kind of stops and then he says, no, I'm not afraid of this giant spider. And she's like, oh, really? And then she says, hey, look, there's a giant spider. And then you see this really comedic scene of Kangchi like running, and then he literally grabs hold of her, right? And then she's like, oh, so you are him. And then the guy's like, why? Have we met before? Do you know me? And she's like, so you don't know me? Then, there's no point, right? If you don't know me, of my telling you, what's the, meaning behind that? Actually, I think that conversation doesn't happen until later on, and he just walks away wondering, oh my gosh, how does she know that I'm afraid of giant spiders? And she just watches him leave thinking, oh, so you were that guy. And what we see in this episode are little scenes interspersed with her spending time with a little boy, and he had told her, I'll protect you and all of this stuff. So they have a history in the past. So she has now found not only her destiny, pair, but someone that she knew when she was a kid. Well, anyway, we move now to Chogonung, our little resident evil guy, and he literally is surrounded by courtesans, and he's just living a very decadent life. And he, when Merchant Park and his son Tessel come to seek audience with him, he leaves them literally standing there at attention for however many minutes, right? And there's this nice little parable or metaphoric like scene of this toad and a, bright little dainty butterfly. And then, of course, when the trap sprung, you see the metaphor of the, toad eating the butterfly, right? Well, anyway, what happens is he finally gives them the time of day, and, Merchant Park humbles himself and he says, I'm really sorry. How can I make compensation for this? And Chogonung says, I want Kangchi, and I want him to be like literally pummeled 200 times. And Merchant Park is saying, he's like a son to me, and he was raised, with my children, and, giving the punishment of 200, paddle sticks is the equivalent of, a capital punishment. And he's like, I don't think that the punishment deserves, the crime or the offense justifies the punishment. And basically, Chogonung like slashes his weight around, and then kind of alludes to the fact that there have been other people who have died. He basically says, I don't let anyone who crosses me to live, right? And because the Merchant Park was saying, that's a really serious punishment, he could die. And that's when Chogonung says, anyone who crosses me, I don't really allow to live, right? Well, so anyway, then he's like, I'll give you something else. Just name your price or name your compensation in exchange for Kangchi's, punishment. And so Chogonung like looks at him assessingly. He's like, I want your in. And of course, everyone freezes. And Chogonung says, oh, I guess that's a little difficult, huh? He's like, well, then give me your daughter. I've taken a liking to her. Ew, creepy. Anyway, so, the father freezes again. And he's like, I guess that's just as difficult too, right? And he's like, so I guess the only choice you have is to bring Kangchi to me so I can, hit him 200 times. Well, then the father flashes back to his meeting with Tam Pyeongjun. Tam Pyeongjun, I think, Yeol's dad, who had said, this is a guy that we've been chasing, and I think he's involved in this conspiracy. He's definitely probably behind all these murders that we're seeing along the Korean countryside, and this guy will not stop at anything. Do not give in to any of his ridiculous demands, because otherwise there's no end to it. And then he tells him, remember what happened to Lord Moon 20 years ago. And, Lord Moon, he's referring back to Seowa's father, right? And ultimately Kangchi's grandfather. And so Merchant Park returns home realizing that, he's going to be fighting this incredibly powerful and evil guy. Well, he doesn't realize how powerful and evil until he's, face to face with this guy. And he remembers Tam Pyeongjun's warning, and so he gets on his knees, which surprises Taeseo because kneeling in front of someone in Korean culture, many of is a sign of abject humility and kind of surrender. So he gets on his knees and says, then instead of Kangchi, let me replace him as the criminal, because I ended up teaching these children incorrectly. And Korean culture is very much a communal culture, so that the sins of the children are really the responsibility or the sins of the parents as well. So Merchant Park says, give me the punishment then, because I raised these children incorrectly. And then the next thing you see is of them leaving the son and Merchant Park, and Chogonung looks at his, right-hand henchman, says, are you just going to let them go quietly? And Chogonung says, well, what can I do? I can't, punish him with 200 paddles, because he is even more beloved in this village than the king is. If I did that, we would get so much hate. And so he says, we'll just have to, find another way. And then he tells his henchmen, we're going to frame Kangchi and frame him for the murder of Merchant Park. And so the henchman's like, really? And he's like, yeah, so go about getting ready to kill Merchant Park. And they're going to frame Kangchi, right? Well, in the meantime, our fun little Kumyo Kangchi, or half Kumyo Kangchi, is trailing Yeol and her companion through the market streets of their town, trying to figure out who they are and what they are, because he just realized that during their last confrontation that she is now a resident of the inn for a while. So he wants to know what they're like, who they are, what they're about. Well, The companion knows they're being trailed, and so does Yolwyn, but she lets him. And then, of course, in a split second, they evade his, I guess, pursuit, and they then watch him, right? Well, Kangchi then goes off, and Yowol and the companion go to meet this Laori, which is a gentleman or a nobleman, if you will. And they're meeting in this little lunch area, and she gives him a report. And apparently, I mean, I think he's someone involved in the investigation, definitely, because she then reports to him of all of her findings, and there's maps and all of those things, right? It's a report. Well, as they're talking, Kangchi ends up seeing the gang member. Do you remember the one that ended up fleecing Merchant Park of 50 young, right? He finds him swindling and harassing some of the merchants, and of course, Kangchi then gets upset, and he then harasses the gang leader and his little gang members into literally kneeling in front of all of the townspeople, the village people, and then surrendering whatever money that they have bullied out of these people. And, the gang leader is like, oh, well, I only have 3 young. That's all we took. And then Kangchi's like, really? He's like, well, what happens? I could personally, rifle through your belongings, and if I find more, then you know what's going to happen. And then very quickly after that threat, they all take money out, and literally it's like a mound, right? Well, because of the ruckus, the nobleman and Yolwyn and her companion, are part of the spectators that are watching the scene unfold. And the nobleman thinks that Kangchi is this thug who is bullying, the villagers out of their money, and he's about to step in and stop them. And I think to a certain extent, Yolwyn wonders too. But before they can do anything, Kangchi then turns around and says to the villagers, line up, because those of you who were swindled today, I'm going to give it back to you. And of course, the people are really excited. They're like, Kangchi, and they're chanting, Kangchi, you're awesome. You're our savior. And, Kangchi tells the gang members, look, if you're going to steal, don't steal from poor people, poor honest people. If you're going to steal from the rich and corrupt. So anyway, into this, Yoa sees this, and a part of her, she finds out a little bit more about him and this man of her destiny. Well, as she's looking though, she happens to see Sojong, the monk, in the crowd, and of course Sojong is looking very fondly over Kangchi and the way he has such a good heart. Well, she follows him and asks, "Sir, do you remember me?" And he's like, "I never forget a face." And she's like, I'm the one with the crescent moon and the peach tree. And he's like, yeah, I never forget a face. And she's like, the thing that you told me about meeting the man of my destiny on that tree under the crescent moon. She's like, what if I don't evade him? What if I can't evade him? What will happen to us, right? And the monk just looks at her, and he's very solemn, and he says, there's a chance one of you will die. And she is just stunned. She's like, me? Am I going to die? And he's just like, I don't know. I can't see that one. There's a chance that one of you may die. So anyway, she's left contemplating the possible consequences of a relationship with this guy if she allows destiny to run its course. Well, Kangchi then returns in the evening with, a jar of wine and some rice cakes as a thank you from the villagers because he helped them out. And we see this really cute little scene where he gives the wine to his adopted father, and they have this nice father-son moment. Well, then he takes the rice cakes and he goes to see Merchant Park because he wants to give it to them, and he sees the family gathered together having a cup of tea that the daughter has poured out, and the dad's getting a little maudlin, thinking that his, baby girl is now going to be getting married soon someday. And then mom tells her son, well, if you had gotten married earlier, then perhaps the space that's going to be left empty by your sister's marriage wouldn't be quite as huge, because then your wife would be there to comfort us, right? Comfort your father, certainly. And then the sister looks at her brother and she's like, brother, are you by any chance afraid of girls? And, Tessa puffs and puffs. He's like, no, I'm not afraid of girls, and, things like that. He's like, I just haven't met the right one. And into this really warm family scene, Kangchi sees this. And, there's a part of him that really wants to be part of that family, accepted. And so the head guard of the inn comes and he says, give up your dream because it's not possible. And, Kangji says, I don't have to be part of that family. Just looking at them makes me feel warm and, feel be welcomed and such. So anyway, he turns to the head guard and he says, "Here, Hyung, older brother." Because in Korean culture, remember, there's that age thing. So someone is older, and if you're close, you call them Hyung or big brother. He's like, "Here, big brother, here is a bag of rice cakes, fresh rice cakes for your midnight or late night snack." And then he tells the guy, "No hard feelings for what you try to do to me, out in the woods. I'll take the first watch. Why don't you get some rest?" Well, as he makes his round, Yowol is in one area of the inn practicing her fighting skills, and of course then Kangchi comes across her practicing, and before he interrupts her though, she's flashing back to her encounter with the monk and the kind of ominous foreshadowing or the warning that there's a good chance that one of them, her or Kangchi, may die if she doesn't try to avoid destiny and all of those things, right? And she says, she thinks to herself, why did it have to be you? Especially because she remembers their past, or that brief moment when they were kids. And so Kangchi comes in and he interrupts her and he's like, "Oh, not bad." He's like, "Hey, you want to fight with me?" And she's like, "No, you have better things to do than fight with me," or something like that. And she's about to walk away and he stops her and he's like, "Do you know me? Have we met before?" And then she looks and she's like, "Let me ask you, do you know me? Have we met before?" And he's like, "I don't know. I don't remember." And she's like, "Well, then there's no point in telling you if you don't remember the significance of that meeting," right? And so she's about to walk away and, I can't remember if he tries to tease her a little bit or whatnot, but all of a sudden he grabs her and literally pulls her down to the ground in a crouch, because what he sees is someone like literally flittering through the roof, and he yells, "Who goes there?" Right? And so the two of them take off in pursuit because, there's an intruder dressed all in black, kind of ninja style. Well, they eventually follow, and ultimately they see this guy this lone figure standing on a roof, and then literally in the blink of an eye, like it's like the doppelganger effect, right? Multiple images of that same guy start popping up all over, and literally they're circled, right? Well, in the meantime, you think that this guy, this evil ninja guy, is actually out to get Merchant Park, right? But the show fools us because there's actually two, evil people going, two evil attacks going on. And as the attack starts, Chogon, our, resident evil guy, is casually playing the Korean version of chess with his head tortoise and saying, chuckling, "Oh, the hunt has now just begun. The fun has now just begun." Well, so Yoa and Kangchi get surrounded by these conjured images or conjured, I guess, ninja guys, right? I'm just going to call them ninja guys. I'm sorry. And, Kangchi's asking her, "Hey, will it hurt? If they're hallucinations or conjured images, will they hurt? Because their swords are conjured too." And she's like, "You could get hurt. So avoid their thing at all costs." And he's like, "Oh my gosh," and they're circled. And she tells him, he's like, "Well, we're going to live or die." And she's like, "No, we're not going to die. You fight to live, because there is no, if we're dead, right?" And so literally you see the episode ends with the, literally the army of ninja guys, tightening the circle, and Yoa and Kangchi getting ready to fight. Well, on the flip side though, Merchant Park is in his room and the wind kind of blows. There's like a, wind that kind of comes through his room, and his candle light is snuffed out. And so he relights it, and he senses that there's a presence there. And remember, Merchant Park, I don't know if I mentioned, has martial arts history. He's actually a warrior, what Koreans call a musa. And that's how he knows Ganpyeongjun, right? But anyway, so he says, "Who goes there?" right? And out walks, or into the room walks, actually he's already in the room, but we see Sojong, the monk, and he's like, "Oh, it's you." And Merchant Park says, did you come here because the 20 years that I'm supposed to, house Kangchi and take care of him is almost over? And the monk's like, yes. And they sit down and they're talking. And Merchant Park says, well, since the time is almost over, will you tell me the true identity and the truth behind Kangchi's past? And he's like, I know that there's something unusual about him because when, actually that first night when I brought him home, the bracelet that is on his wrist, it accidentally fell because he was hurt by, a candlestick. There was a little accident. And then the monk says, oh, and what happened? Really interestingly. And then Merchant Park kind of backs away and he's like, who are you? And the monk's like, what do you mean, who am I? And then Merchant Park's like, who are you? What is your true identity? And literally in kind of like a, spine chilling scene, you see the camera does this really cool thing where it looks at the monk, and then on the flip side, it shows one, the head henchman ninja guy, right? And he's like, tell me the truth about what you know about Kangchi, right? And so it's like this confrontation on both sides. Merchant Park is now fighting for his life in front of his henchmen, while Yeowol and Kangchi are surrounded by equally frightening ninja guys with the same swords. And that's how the episode ends. So for those of you who are done listening and you don't want to hear my musings, you can click out of here. For those of you who want to stick around, what I wanted to just say is this episode has just raised the stakes that much higher. If you go to my blog, you'll read a very short clip of how I said it's way steeper. The stakes have gotten way steeper and such. But I'm really liking the story. It so much gets packed into one episode, and the thing that I really appreciate about this series is that not only is the story compellingly told, lots of action just packed into one scene, but the characters are really characters that you want to root for. The good characters are they possess characteristics that just make you want to know more about them. And for me, the hallmark of a great series is when every episode there's something new. There's something that keeps luring the audience back. And with this series, every episode we learn something new about the characters, or a new character is introduced, or something happens in the plot that opens a little bit more of this particular world, to us. So I'm really liking that. I love the fact that Kangchi has a lot of friends, really good friends. Tessol, there's no rivalry. It's more than anything else. They're really bosom buddies, and I appreciate that. I love the fact that Yeowol and Kangchi can hold their own, and they have a history, together, even though Kangchi can't remember. And Yeowol is she's aware of the circumstances with their meeting, and I love the fact that even though the second generation's relationship, the beginning of one, in some ways is a revisiting of the first generation, Woryong and Seowa's relationship. I think it's going to be definitely different because she's aware of the circumstances. She's walking into this partially with her eyes open, knowing that there's a chance one of them will die and that this is the man of her destiny. And unlike Seowa, she's smart. Yeowol is smart. She is able to take care of herself. She's a thinking girl. She's smart. She rocks. So anyway, this is getting too long. I want to make sure I stop this before it hits 40 minutes. Thanks for watching, everyone. Pictures and all of that are on my blog, KoreanReviews.com. KoreanDramaReviews.com, or you can just Google Musings of a Twinkie. And that's it. So next week, I'm looking forward to it. So I hope you guys are. Thank you so much for watching, continuing to support this new little fledgling, channel of mine and this new adventure into Korean drama land. So take care, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.